only thing we have to fear is
in war,
fear itself.
there is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we've earned, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome to the intersection of faith and politics. This is WallBuilders Live with David Barton and Rick Green. We appreciate you joining us today. Be sure and visit online at wallbuilders.com and wallbuilderslive.com. We're looking at things from both a biblical and a historical point of view, all kinds of issues in the culture. And we have to look at history in order to get everything in context. And David, I'm curious about today's topic. We're going to be talking about agencies that have become basically...
let me take in a different direction for a bit. Let me just talk about agencies and their responsibilities.
Oh, okay, sure.
And so let me just take the concept of Department of Homeland Security and illegal immigration. How do you think they've done with handling illegal immigration?
Oh, stellar. I mean, there's no illegal immigrants coming across the border right now. We don't have any kind of a crisis at the border. There's no gang members, only about 100,000 or so that have come across from Central America into Texas lately, only about 5,000 murders. And so they're doing great, yeah.
So you think the agency is doing a really good job of protecting the border from illegal immigrants?
I wish. If we had a president that would let them, they probably could do a better job. But
see, you just don't get told all the news because, as it turns out, Department of Homeland Security has been very efficient in rounding up illegal immigrants, especially those from Great Britain, and they use SWAT teams. And you never see on the news that they go after an illegal immigrant with a SWAT team, but they do. And a great example recently in North Carolina, a SWAT team from Department of Homeland Security descended on, surrounded, and was able to secure an illegal immigrant and get it out of there promptly. And the illegal immigrant I'm talking about is a British illegal immigrant known as the Range Rover. And the Range Rover we know as a luxury SUV vehicle. It's made by Jaguar, the famous British thing. But as it turns out, the EPA emissions are too high. EPA says the emissions are too high. And so they say that because the emissions are wrong, that the Range Rover is here illegally. So fortunately, we had a SWAT team descend on a family in North Carolina and get that illegal immigrant out of their yard. Because
please tell me you're kidding.
I'm not kidding. They're descending on Range Rovers because the emissions are too high, and so they're confiscating Range Rovers. And as we all know, there's no way you can go to people and say, hey, your car has too high emissions. We have to go after that with a SWAT team, because who knows what that Range Rover could do. If we weren't able to surround it with all the AR-15s, I mean, who knows what that Range Rover would have done, and who knows what would have happened with those people if it hadn't been for that SWAT team to descend on that Range Rover.
Yeah, because you have seen Transformers, right?
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, I'm sure that was the concern.
That was it.
There was a major meeting at the Pentagon over whether or not this was. I'm drawing a blank. I can't think of one of
Megatron,
Decepticon, or whatever all those names are. Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah, that's what it was. So, we have to commend the Department of Homeland Security for doing a good job of finding and tracking down and surrounding and using SWAT teams to remove illegal immigrants, which leads to the discussion we are going to have today is what in the heck do a bunch of regulatory agencies, what are they doing with SWAT teams? Why does, for example,
Department of Education has
that's
one.
Right. I mean, are we going to use a SWAT team now because this school did not remove their snack machines, so we're going to send a SWAT team into it? Why does the Department of Education need a SWAT team? Why does the EPA need a SWAT team? Why does the IRS need a SWAT team? And what's happening is all these agencies are coming up with SWAT teams now, and you know how SWAT teams are supposed to work. I mean, they come with a big, visible, loud show of force. They yell. They're really loud. They're high. They're very scary looking, and it's made. It is for the purpose of intimidation and fear. That's how they work. And so, tell me why the IRS needs this. I mean, tell me why we can't just send a notice or a subpoena or notification or an agent to the door and say, hey, We need to look over whatever. And tell me why the EPA just can't show up with a lawsuit or a subpoena or something. Why do we have to come with all these guns? And why not just show up at the home of these people in North Carolina and say, hey, your car emissions are too high. That violates federal law. You're going to have to get rid of this or you're facing a fine. No. We got to show with a SWAT team. This is a real problem in America when this is what we're letting our agencies do, is create these military-type SWAT teams to go after things like Range Rovers.
Yeah, federal agencies taking these SWAT teams into, can I say harass our people and eat out their substance?
That's a good line.
That's
and by
right
the way,
out of the Declaration, baby. You know.
For people who didn't recognize that is a direct quote out of the Declaration. There is nothing new under the sun. We're right back to that. He has erected a multitude of new offices among us.
And sent hither, check this out. I didn't even think about this. Sent hither swarms of officers.
Oh, there they are.
To harass our people. And I didn't even think about the first part of it.
Yep.
So that's exactly what happened. We've created new offices, and swarms of officers. That's what's happening right now. Well, listen, there's actually a Congressman, Chris Stewart, out of Utah that's taken this on and said, look, this has gone way too far. He's got legislation making its way through Congress even as we speak. To demilitarize these regulatory agencies that are not law enforcement agencies. So he's going to come on when we come back from the break and tell us about the progress of that legislation and why he's taking this on. Chris Stewart when we return right here on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. In the case Abedin versus Shemp, the Supreme Court ruled that the Bible could no longer be an independent textbook in public school curriculum. Would our founding fathers have agreed? Benjamin Rush certainly would have disagreed. Benjamin Rush was a signer of the Declaration of Independence, and he was a leading educator of the day. In fact, he was the first founding father to call for free public schools. Benjamin Rush declared, "The great enemy of the salvation of man, in my opinion, never invented a more effective means of extinguishing Christianity from the world than by persuading mankind that it was improper to read the Bible at schools. The Bible should be read in our schools in preference to all other books." In the view of founding father Benjamin Rush, the Bible was the textbook of preference for public schools.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. Our guest today, Congressman Chris Stewart from Utah. How you doing, Congressman?
I'm doing great. Thanks for giving me a few minutes of your time.
No, we appreciate you coming on and very much want to talk about this demilitarization of so many of our federal agencies that have no business having these SWAT-like teams. I'm glad you've taken this on.
Yeah, it's so obvious to us, isn't it? I mean, why in the world should the EPA or the IRS or the FDA or any of these dozens and dozens of federal regulatory agencies have SWAT teams? And the key word here is regulatory agencies. These aren't law enforcement agencies. They're not the FBI. They're not the federal marshals. These are regulators, and they've taken on this approach that they're the tip of the spear, and they're overly aggressive, and it's intimidating, and there's no reason for it.
That's a great point. They're regulatory, not law enforcement. We've blurred that line so much that anybody in government now is the enforcer.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And heavens, if this is the FBI, I wouldn't be proposing this legislation.
Yeah.
If they were federal marshals, I wouldn't be proposing this legislation. But these are the EPA and IRS and all these others, and they just don't need it. And one of the fundamental challenges we have of this generation is there are boatloads of people like me and like a bunch of others who just don't trust the federal government anymore. But when we see this kind of heavy-handed, intimidating tactics, it makes us trust them less, not more. And that's what we're really hoping to accomplish here is, as you say, just kind of demilitarize this and allow perhaps a more even-handed and a more level-headed local sheriffs and local law enforcement to step in where right now the federal government is doing such a heavy-handed job at it.
And that's a great point, Congressman. Just the fact that agency, instead of them coming in on their own and trying to enforce that they would have to go to that local sheriff or that local, police instead of the feds enforcing. Their job should be to go through those local folks. And we're not just talking about somebody with a sidearm. I mean, they have SWAT type tactics and equipment. It's costly, and it's potentially dangerous and potentially going to cause people to trust the government less. I mean, the first time you have a horrific situation with one of these, where someone is wrongly accused and perhaps killed. I mean, there's some terrible things that could happen here. You're going to have an even greater distrust of government. Yeah,
and we've got examples, and there's so many of them. And we had an example where a small farm not far from here in D.C. was selling a few gallons of milk a day to a coalition of mothers here in Washington, D.C., who wanted unpasteurized milk for their kids. These guys come swooping in with these SWAT teams. A woman in California who had a SWAT team descend on her once again for a small grocery store with raw milk. Another one who was accused of violating Endangered Species Act for trading in coral. I could go on and on with examples of this. And, when you talk to the agencies, they say, oh, no, we don't have any SWAT teams. Well, that's because they don't call it a SWAT team. They call it a SET team, which stands for Special Event Tactical Team, which sounds an awful lot like a SWAT team to people like you and me.
Hey, if it walks like a duck, right?
Yep. Quack, quack.
Exactly right, man. No doubt about it. So what has to happen here? So this bill that you've got would where does it draw the line on which agencies would be allowed to have the tactical teams?
Well, once again, it draws a very fine distinction between traditional law enforcement agencies and regulatory agencies. If it falls under Department of Justice, we don't have any intention of interfering with what they're doing at all. If they fall under a regulatory agency, then we want to have this bill apply to them and to take a look at how much money they're spending, what kind of weapons they're using, what kind of tactics they're using, and to make sure that they haven't gone over the line, because in some cases very clearly they have.
Quick break. We'll be right back. We're talking about just the crazy militarization of our regulatory agencies at the federal level, Department of Education and others with SWAT-like teams, tactical teams, machine guns, grenades. It's just over the top. And fortunately, Congressman Chris Stewart has a bill, Regulatory Agency Demilitarization Act, that will put an end to this. And we're going to talk more about it when we come back. So stay with us right here on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Our founding fathers, despite their common love for America, did not always agree with each other in politics. Such was the case between John and Samuel Adams. John was the leader of the Federalist Party, and Samuel was the leader of the Anti-Federalist Party. Consequently, political disagreements were not unusual between these two. On October the 4th, 1790, Sam wrote John and told him, "Let ministers and philosophers, statesmen and patriots unite their endeavors to renovate the age by educating their little boys and girls and leading them in the study and practice of the exalted virtues of the Christian system." 2 weeks later, John wrote back and told Samuel that on this issue they both agreed. While these two prominent founding fathers disagreed on much, they both agreed on the importance of educating the next generation in the principles of Christianity.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. Our guest today, Congressman Chris Stewart. We're talking about his bill that is called the Regulatory Agency Demilitarization Act, which will prevent these federal agencies that are regulatory and not law enforcement from having these over-the-top tactical teams in place. And so tell us again, Congressman, exactly how does the bill work? Does it actually stop them from being able to engage in this, or does it just analyze? You were talking about they would have to answer the questions and give you the information.
Well, it's a little bit of both, actually. And part of the reason we had to have that analysis part to the bill is because it's been nearly impossible for us to gather information on these agencies. We've brought them in and asked them, and the representatives have said, well, on advice of the Department of Justice, we're not going to answer that question. Well, you'd ask them, well, how much are you spending on these SWAT teams? Well, we can't answer that question. Well, where are they deployed, and what's your rules of engagement for using them? Well, we're not going to answer that question. So the bill actually requires both. We intend through this bill to defund these agencies that have these set teams, but we also want to explore further about where they are and how they have been employed, and force them to answer questions and to fess up to what they're doing with these set teams.
Well, Congressman, how can you guys do your job of oversight if they're not even giving you how can they say we're not going to answer that question to a congressman? This is what you're supposed to do, right?
It's extraordinarily arrogant and extraordinarily frustrating. And it's one of the primary problems we have right now in Washington, D.C., is these agencies just consider themselves a law and a power unto themselves.
Yeah.
And it's absurd that we have allowed them that type of authority to where they would just thumb their nose at Congress. And that's why we have to get this bill passed. And I'm hoping that my good friend Harry Reid will allow this bill to come to the floor in the Senate, but I'm very skeptical that he will, because unfortunately this is like literally hundreds of other bills that the Republicans have passed, 354 and counting, that sit on Harry Reid's desk, which is why it's so important, in my opinion, that we have a new Senate Majority Leader come January next year.
So this is actually passed the House then?
No, it hasn't passed the House. It will. We're very optimistic on that. We think in fact, it's passing with fairly bipartisan support here. But that's not going to be the bottleneck. The bottleneck will be when it reaches the Senate floor.
Yeah, no doubt. And I would think that the coalition would be strong on this. From all kinds of liberty lovers and those that not only have a healthy, fear of government having too much power, those that don't want it abused, and those that just want this to be in the proper jurisdictions and proper places and not across the federal government. So it seems like there'd be a lot of different folks, liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican, on board with this.
You're exactly right, and you stated it very well. You have to twist yourself into a pretzel to justify what these agencies are doing. Libertarian, conservative, progressive, why would anyone be comfortable with that?
Yeah.
And that's why we actually have received bipartisan support. And by the way, normally when you're trying to propose a bill or to gather support for it, you go down on the House floor, you meet with people, you kind of twist some arms, you explain it, you ask for help. That hasn't been the case with this bill. But we've had many, many people approach us and approach me individually saying, hey, I've heard about your RAD bill. I want to get on that. I understand what you're trying to do. I'm uncomfortable. The people in my district, in my home state, are uncomfortable. I want to support that bill. It's been an easy sell. Yeah,
you ring the bell whenever they come to you instead of you having to chase them down to get their support.
Makes your job easier. Doesn't happen very often, though.
Yeah.
But it does help.
Well, Congressman, we appreciate you jumping on this and want to help in any way we can. I guess the best thing for listeners across the country to do, they need to call and write their congressman. How do they describe the bill to the office whenever they call their local congressman?
If they just call and say the RAD Act, Congressman Stewart from Utah is pushing it. That's all they need to say.
Okay.
And the other offices will pick it up. And that's just the acronym it's known by, but they'll know immediately what that is.
Got it. The Regulatory Agency Demilitarization Act, the RAD Act, by Congressman Stewart. Folks, get on those phones. If you agree with this, you need to make those phone calls. Congressman, we appreciate your help. Thank you for coming on today.
Hey, it's been fun. Thanks. I hope we get a chance to talk again.
You got it. Back in a moment with David Barton. Have you ever wanted to learn more about the United States Constitution but just felt like, man, the classes are boring, or it's just that old language from 200 years ago, or I don't know where to start? People want to know, but it gets frustrating because you don't know where to look for truth about the Constitution either. Well, we've got a special program for you available now called Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green, and it's actually a teaching done on the Constitution at Independence Hall in the very room where the Constitution was framed. We take you both to Philadelphia, the cradle of liberty, and Independence Hall, and to the WallBuilders Library, where David Barton brings the history to life to teach the original intent of our founding fathers. We call it the Quick Start Guide to the Constitution because in just a few hours through these videos, you will learn the Citizen's Guide to America's Constitution. You'll learn what you need to do to help save our constitutional republic. It's fun, it's entertaining, and it's going to inspire you to do your part to preserve freedom for future generations. It's called Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green. You can find out more information on our website now at WallBuilders.com.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. Thanks to Congressman Chris Stewart for coming on today and for taking on this important battle. So, David, this is, I hadn't thought about, I mean, he really lays out, there really is a distinct difference between law enforcement and regulatory, and there's just no reason. But can you believe what he said about how they won't even answer a congressman? What happened to oversight?
I'll tell you what, man, not answering a congressman, that ought to be grounds for elimination of that office right on the spot.
Yeah.
That we will zero out your budget, period. And when you decide to remember that we're over you and you're not over us, then we might let you come back. But we'll have new directors, new managers. And by the way, tenure for federal bureaucrats is gone. You know, and until we get some kind of accountability. But you're right. This is regulatory stuff trying to be law enforcement, and they're not. When the Constitution was written, there was only 3 federal felonies that belonged to the federal government: piracy, counterfeiting, and treason. Every other offense belonged to the states to enforce. The feds were not the law enforcement officials. They enforce federal laws, but they don't enforce all these other areas. And now there's 4,500 federal felonies. They have taken over everything in the way of police powers. And that a SWAT team for unpasteurized milk? You got to be kidding me. Women that want to buy unpasteurized milk for their kids, and you send a SWAT team in for that? And the fact that oh no, we don't have SWAT teams. They're set teams. Hey, that's a real problem. Because, you know, that's manipulation. There's 6 forms of lying, and one is to mislead. That's a flat-out lie, and it's... Thank you very much.
Yes, it is. It's walking like a duck.
That's right. Set team, SWAT team. So
it carries an AR like a duck.
Exactly right. It looks just like a... And I want to deal with something in the last few minutes we've got here.
Yeah.
Because he was talking about there's 354 bills the House has passed that the Senate won't take up. Now, if you listen to the news... All the lockdown is over on the House side. The House refuses to move on anything. The House won't do anything. Harry Reid's over there just wishing the House would send the 354 bills that Harry Reid won't take up. Now, what are the chances Harry Reid will not be Senate leader next time? We're sitting a little more than a month out from the elections. Let me just kind of go over some races real quick, because at this point, there's probably 14 races, Senate races, that could shift hands. There's only 5 needed for Republicans to pick up the Senate and for Harry Reid not to be the majority leader anymore. So if you have a different look in the Senate, you might have a vote on 354 bills. Now, it might be true that the president would veto all 354, but at least it's a public news at that point in time, and you will find out that Congress is doing something and moving forward. So let me just go through the races real quick, because what we have right now is out of the 14 races, 3 of them probably are already settled. 3 of them probably already switched hands. They're in the hands of Democrats. They will probably be going into the hands of Republicans. At least right now, the Republicans have up to a 20-point lead. And so that's West Virginia, South Dakota, and Montana. Those are currently held by 3 Democrat senators, probably go Republicans. So Republicans would need 2 more to pick it up. Now, out of the remaining 11 or so, 2 of the races are where Republicans are having to defend themselves against Democrat challengers. So that was not expected. Georgia, the Democrat has a chance there in the Senate in Georgia. Kansas has a chance in Kansas. So that could put you back to needing 4 seats. I don't think Republicans will lose either one of those 2 seats, but that's a possibility. So you still need anywhere from 2 to 4 more seats to get over. So the other 9 seats left would be potential switches from D to R, from Democrat to Republican. Probably the hardest ones are going to be Minnesota, Michigan, Louisiana. But the remaining 6, Arkansas, Alaska, New Hampshire, Iowa, Colorado, and North Carolina, right now are toss-up races and are within the margin of error. They could go either way. So can Republicans pick up 2 more out of those 6 that are toss-up? Possibly. So it looks like they're within 2 right now. They have 6 more that are toss-ups and 3 more that are long shots. I would, if I were guessing right now, I think Republicans will probably pick up 6, maybe 7 seats. We'll see. The rating is right now, national groups are saying it's probably a 52% chance that Democrats hold on to the Senate. And I think that's close. It's toss-up. It'll be 1 or 2 above or 1 or 2 below unless people really show up and really vote. And that is one of the things that we've been very involved with, is making sure there are voter guides on the ground in key battleground states, that people have a hard copy voting guide in their hands so they know who these guys are and what they stand for. So there is a chance that these 354 bills that have been passed by the House that the Senate refuses to take up, that we can get some action on that if we get a change in November. So that would be really good, and that would mean that Chris's bill probably would go forward in the next session. I really doubt that Reid will take it up. I think the House will pass it, but I don't think Reid will even give it a hearing. But get that turned around, and next time we'll see these kind of bills start going through, so that agencies, regulatory agencies, don't have these military SWAT teams.
Well, I appreciate the way you laid out the races, because that should tell everybody back home, hey, this is one of those races where one of those years, one of those elections where it really does matter that you show up, because everything is so close. You could be the tipping point.
That's right.
One way or the other. You stay home, it tips the other way. You get out there and vote and get your friends and family and tell folks at your church, and go to all those websites, ChristianVoterGuide.com and iVoterGuide.com, and make sure that you're getting informed and that you're informing others. You're not just one vote. You ought to be 100 votes if you're just getting on Facebook and sending those emails out.
Well, there's a number of governor's races that are not getting any attention at all that are really, really key. The Maine governor race, Paul LePage and Mike Michaud, and the Kansas governor race, Sam Brownback and Paul Davis, and the Florida governor's race between Rick Scott and Charlie Crist, and the Hawaii governor's race between Duke Iona and David Ig, and the Arkansas governor's race between Asa Hutchinson and Mike Ross. Every one of them, there is a huge difference between the two candidates. I mean, one's really far left and the other's really far right. And so if you want to get back to constitutional government, look at the governor's races as well as the Senate races, because there's a lot at stake coming up in a little over a month from now.
Thanks for listening, folks. You've been listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand undivided, forever